Today is October 13th, 2007. We're here in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Circle Cinema. We're pleased to have Mr. Joshua Henson, Captain of the U.S. Navy.
Josiah,
beg your pardon. Mr. Henson, if you would be so kind, tell us your story. Thank you for coming and tell us your story.
Well, I go by Joe anyway, whatever. Well, I was in Tulsa Central High School, and my brother, who was a three-time NCAA wrestling champion from Oklahoma A&M in those days, was a lot of people said the greatest of up to that time, and they wanted him to come up to the Naval Academy and be a wrestling coach. So he went up there and coached wrestling for a few years, and he couldn't get medical school, which is the reason he went up there. So medical schools around, because he was married, and they said, well, you can't hold down that job and come to medical school. He thought he could, but wouldn't prefer. So make it short, he went into the Navy when the war started himself, and then went through with the help of the GI Bill after the war was over. Anyway, he called me up one day, and from Annapolis, and he said, man, you ought to come up and take a look at this. It's a hell of a deal. Not only that, you got a job when you get out, and we're going to get in this war. He said, no doubt about that. Hitler had gone into the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and we all knew we were going to be in that war sometime. And so he said, come up and take a look at it. Stay with me. So I did. And they showed me around a couple of days, and I was coming up senior year Tulsa Central High School. And so I looked around. It was interesting, very, very interesting. I hadn't thought much about it before. And finally they said, would you like to come here? The wrestling coach wanted me to come up here. Not my brother, but the senior wrestling coach. Because Tulsa Central High School had been coached by Art Griffith and were famous for wrestlers. They went on scholarships all over the United States all the time. So I said, yeah, I'd like that. I think it would. Being a kid, 18 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and really didn't much care. Hadn't worried about it much at that time. Never studied, never took my book home, copied my homework from the girl in front of me, did all the bad things, all the wrong things. And so they handed me two pieces of paper. One of them was math, and one of them was English. They were tests, past tests. Said, could you pass this test? And I looked at one of them for a while. And I looked at the other one for a while. I handed them back to him. I said, hell no, man, I can't pass either one of those. So I never did my homework, never studied. I should have, but I didn't. Well, there's a possibility. Drop a course and don't graduate this year. Come back, go back to school half a year till Christmas time. Then come up here. We'll help you go to a prep school up here to prep you. And I went home, started studying for the first time. And sure enough, I graduated mid-year in 41. Well, with a class of 41. I went to Christmas in 1940, and then I went up there for about 2.5 months, and then I took the test, and I just barely passed. But I passed, just barely. So I went to the Naval Academy, which I hadn't expected to do, but I'm thankful I did. I think it was a wonderful opportunity, not knowing what I wanted to do or any idea. One brother was an engineer, the other one was a doctor, or going to be a doctor. And I ended up having a naval career, which was interesting because, my family and I lived in Panama. 2 kids were born in Panama. I lived in Cuba, in Guantanamo Bay for 2 years. And I lived in France for 2 years. That's the embassy over there. I think the military, really, I'd like to enlist a few people here. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. My kids speak French fluently because I made them go to French school. If you concentrate on this, you have to fight with the kids. They wanted to go to the American school over there. But anyway, I graduated when I'd been there 6 months, Pearl Harbor happened. And they shortened the classes 3, 4, 5 months. In my time, the class ahead of me graduated exactly 3 years, and my class did 2. We had to go in all summer and things like that. So I had gone up there with the help of the wrestling coach, and I mean he guided me through it, helped me get an appointment from Will Rogers, not the Will Rogers, the one who was a congressman at large in Oklahoma back in 1940, when we had about 8 congressmen and 1 at large. Name was Will Rogers. He was a farmer, which we wish more congressmen were like what their constituents need, you know, and a farm. Anyway, so I went up there and I graduated in 3 years, and I had a nice time because I ended up being captain of the wrestling team, and I was back there to teach a couple of times and tried out for the Olympics and things like that. So I graduated and got married 2 days later. I graduated on the 7th, on 5th or 6th of June, 1944 was D-Day. I graduated on the 7th. On the 9th, I got married in the chapel. And if you expect me to remember B-Day, I didn't know anything. The 3 biggest events of my life just about all happened in a 2-day period, see. So anyway, then I went to Jacksonville for indoctrination in aviation, and I went out to the Pacific and got on the USS California. And I hadn't been on it 3 weeks that we were in the Leyte Gulf. Leyte Gulf was a huge battle for the Philippines. We took MacArthur back there, as a matter of fact. My ship had 14-inch guns, so we could carry big guns within, and it hit anything within several miles of the ocean where we were sitting. And there were about 5 old battleships. My ship was sunk. California, USS California, was sunk at Pearl Harbor, raised, modernized, modern fire control equipment, and joined the 7th Fleet. So we went in with all the landing craft to shore bombard. So you go in there a couple of days early, and you start shore bombarding all the things that intelligence told you there were. And one of the values in those days of old battleships, we had 14-inch guns. The newest battleships had 16-inch guns. Later on, we ran up against the Japanese, who had 18-inch guns, which are the biggest guns ever made, but 16 was probably big enough. Because those big guns with armor-piercing projectiles that weighed more than an automobile, you know, the only thing that would overcome reinforced concrete sub-pens. And submarines are vicious, terrible weapon. I mean, they worry me still. So we shore bombarded a couple of days, and I was down on a computer in the guts of the ship. So I heard everything on the phones, on the sound-powered phones, but I didn't see anything. And we ended up with success. We took MacArthur back, and his staff put them ashore. Not my ship, but one of the ships I don't even know which one it was, in our group took him back. And then, after the initial invasion, you do what's... I'm going to leave this for a moment, because I want to tell you about this, because after the second invasion was at Lingayen Gulf up in Luzon, way up north in Luzon. And by then I was transferred from the computer down in the guts of the ship up to the director, which controlled 2 5-inch mounts with 2 guns each. That's with 5-inch diameter. 5-inch 38 means 5-inch in diameter, the projectile was, and 38 times 5 for the length of it. And so I was up in a director, and a director is like a big tube that sits up here on a steel tube, and it moves around like this, and they have a 3 men up there and me. I was the director officer. One of them he turns this thing hydraulically with his hand, and he keeps the vertical line on the bogey. A bogey is an unidentified, but it really meant enemy to us most of the time, you know. He keeps that on, and every time he's on, he clicks. He's clicking almost continually because he follows that. And see, they would circle the fleet, but they'd pick out a ship to come in and try to hit. So he keeps hitting the button. Every time he hits the button, he's sending a signal to the computer, which I was on before, down in the guts. And the other guy has a hand wheels, and he has a horizontal line, and he keeps it on that plane horizontally, and he pulls the trigger every time he's on it, so they're pulling it almost continually. He's got a hand grip here. And then the third one is in the middle, and he's got a rangefinder, we called it. It was stuck out about 6 feet on both sides, out beyond our little shell that was turning all the time. And it had some diamonds in there. When you first look at them, they look flat, and then pretty soon they had some depth to them. And the middle diamond, he'd keep on top of that by turning his knobs and pulling the trigger every time he was on. So we had one guy keeping track of the distance, one guy up and down, other guy this way. The guys in the computer were they were making a bug run across the computer, which was about the size of a card table and about up to your here, and you were doing knobs and trying to make your little bug match what was being created by the guys above. What they plugged in there was causing a bug to run across the top of this thing. Well, we were training, moving it this way and that way, and trying to until it got it. It ran right with him, and then we say we got a solution. And if they were in range, they say commence firing. And then what that information was doing was setting the time on a fuse, which is a nose cone, and it had some tabs on there, and they fit in the slot. And as they went up, when they start firing, you start sending those up, and that tab was being set by the information from the director going to the computer and up to the ammunition hoist. The only error was from the time the guy takes the shell out and jams it in, close it up, and shoot it. A matter of a second or two. And so then that would set the explosion off to go off just in front of the airplane coming in, if you could. So that was what I was doing. And so at Lengay and Cole, from the north part of Luzon, I was sitting up there, and in an invasion, you have all these landing craft. Some of them got tanks in them, LSTs, landing ship tank, LSI, landing ship infantry, you know, and they're all shaped differently, and they go forward and plop down like this, and the tanks for the guys go out, and here we are now. So you sit there, I sat there and watched the ships, the big ships unload the landing craft, and they'd go in circle up until somebody fired a star shell, which was just the time everybody had sat there watched to the right time, exact second. And as soon as they did, all these guys going and would straighten out. The leader would straighten out and just like come around and follow him all in to the beach. And as soon as they did that, we quit firing right on. We started firing rapid fire just about that time. For a short time, when they got within 100 yards of the beach, we raised it up 100 yards and kept on firing. And as they hit the beach, we quit firing rapid fire, and we had a plane which was catapulted off of the top of one of our 14-inch guns on top of a turret, which put him in headed him into the wind and fired a powder cartridge, which gave him a boom, you know, pushed him off that.
It was almost like it was rocket launched.
Yeah, that's what it is. Only this was in a chamber which ran through a bunch of cables through and pushed him off, and it was a biplane. So, and he went over, and he was our plane, so he'd spot for us, and we had a grid, and they had a grid, and we got from the forward fire control guys, the guys that were the furthest forward, were saying, I've got a command car or something coming down the road at such and such. He'd give you this grid number, and we had the same grid, and we'd try to land, and he'd give us a spot. He'd get excited, you know. Oh, you hit him that time. Oh, he said, you hit right on him, you know. First time he said, give me 100 yards up, and they 50 yards back, and they turn around and start trying to miss us, and we hit him one time. I remember he got so excited, a young kid flying that plane up there for us. Anyway, that was an education, getting to see a huge invasion like this and being able to offer all the assistance you possibly could to the guys ashore. And maybe some of those Marines and some of them were Army divisions and different ones like this. And some of them were called forward fire control parties. And they were poor guys right up there head of the Marines, trying to tell you where to put. That was called call fire. They'd tell you where to shoot, try to hit these targets and so on. Anyway, after a few days, interesting thing, with the World War II vets, we go out and talk to the students here anytime a school asks, and they want to know, about the kamikazes, which means divine wind, because the 2 times the divine wind had come up and saved Japan from the Mongols back in Genghis Khan's time, and another time, and they called that wind kamikaze. So they call these pilots kamikaze. Well, back at Lady Gulf, which was 3 weeks earlier, we'd seen some guys and said, hey, they look like they were trying to fly into the ship. Well, by this time the Japanese realized, hey, things are getting tight. These Americans are coming along, hopping right up these islands. And so we didn't think much about it. I remember the surprise of some guys saying, I was down in the guts, I didn't see it. Later on I was up, I didn't see him. And said, hey, looked like you tried to fly right under the ship. 4 or 5 of those guys. That was at Lady Gulf. And that was in October of 44. And I graduated June of 44, and I was just out there, brand new out there. And then in about late December, we were up in Lingayen Gulf, where we are now, where I'm talking about now. Somehow, I don't know what kind of communications they had, but those Japs realized that those guys were missing our ships with kamikazes. See, a ship was going like this, and a young guy, 17 years old maybe 15, 18, I don't know what they were. They were young guys, and they just had enough flying experience to get off and go fly themselves into a ship with a bomb on them. And they would circle us, that's where we used to be watching them, and then they'd pick out a big ship and they would come in, and they'd go down about a 30-degree dive. And that's damn steep. It's steeper than you imagine. I'll give you an example. If you were driving along the highway and it had turn-off place for trucks if they lose their brakes, you've seen those. You know what that grade is? A good one is about 6%. The biggest I've ever seen in the United States is 7%. So that when you come at a 30 degree, this guy doesn't know what he's doing and lift is perpendicular to the wing, you see. So as he came in here, he was also going forward. And he came down like this. The first day, we had many kamikazes. They had to mobilize, boy, and they came out. Ships, every few minutes was several ships shooting at them. And they'd come out and they'd get steeper and steeper and steeper. And first thing you know, they were trying to fly like this and maybe even trying to tuck back, and they couldn't because the lift was still perpendicular to the wings. They went in the water. So I'll bet you, I would guess, roughly 50% of them flew into the water. And of course, that was harmless to us. We were happy they did. But I had this strange feeling. I felt sorry for those kids. I said, my God, how could you have a worse feeling of your moment of death, the last few seconds, to realize it's all wasted? And you could see you can't hit that ship, and the water's coming up. Went in the water. But how would that? I felt kind of sorry for those 18-year-old kids. Maybe it's a strange feeling. I was trying to kill them, but still, I said, my God, I hope I never have to experience something like that. Anyway, the next day, or about the 3rd day, the Japs somehow realized what the hell was happening. And so they changed their tactics. I don't know how the word got back to Japan or the other forces, but they started coming in real low on the water. And I remember this one day, about the 2nd or 3rd day in there, it was a Betty. Now, a Betty was a light bomber with twin engines, 2 engines, and they were flying. It looked to me like 5 feet over the water. It was probably 30 or 40 feet over the water. They were out several miles, but they're coming in right over the water. And we all saw him, and all the ships start firing, and you could see the shells converging on him, because every 4th shell in all of the guns, 20 millimeters, 40 millimeters, or 5-inch, that was the 3 anti-aircraft guns we had, was a tracer. So you would think it's just like turning the hose on. You can see that, but it isn't. It's still hard to hit. But they were all converging, not only from our ship, but others. You could see all these lights, just like 4th of July, converging on this ship. And the damn thing hit the water. We saw a big splash. Oh, that's it. But he keeps coming. Now, I wonder what the hell's going on. It must have ruined the props. I don't know, but he kept coming. And all this stuff again. And he hit the water again. Big splash, kept right on coming. By this time, he's somewhere between a half a mile and a mile out there. And we begin to say, hey, what do we got to do? And we kept, you see this, all stuff converging. He hit the water a 3rd time and exploded. All the gasoline, every big fire. So big relief does. But I don't know, it was the same day or the next day, I'm sitting up here in this director watching all this, and here comes a guy on our starboard quarter. And now I'll give you a seamanship lesson. This is a ship. That's the bow, that's the stern, that's the beam, that's the port beam, starboard beam. This is the port bow, starboard bow, port bow, starboard quarter, which is halfway between the beam. And it's like the clock code, you know. Well, high area is at 10 o'clock or something like that, but it's quicker, so you just say them. And so he comes in on our starboard quarter, halfway between our beams, somewhere in here. And he comes in right towards us, and I'm looking at him, and it looked like he's just leaving with me. And I'm maybe 60 feet in the air or something in this director. And that son of a gun comes right up like this, and we're shooting at him. And he comes right here and whips up like this, right at me. And I'm looking at him. I said, I'm dead. My wife one time told about it, remarked on a TV story we were watching that 2 planes ran together over Los Angeles airport. And these man and his wife were out there, and they said this big passenger plane was coming down. They said, we thought we were dead. My wife said, that must be a horrible feeling. I said, no, not a horrible feeling. I was there. I mean, I've never said it to you, but I thought I was dead because this engine looked the side of that wall right in my face. But at the last minute, the same thing. The lift was this way. He went right past me, and I was on the right side, and he hit sky aft. Killed 44 men, injured 140 more. And we had burial at sea for those 44 guys that we could find. It's a horrible sight. One guy here in town, Alan J. Edwards, he's now lives out at Inverness. He was on the California, and he went around the captain. He was the bugleman, and he was up on the sky. He saw that plane all the way in, and he said, because he trying to help identify them and look at their dog tags when things got quiet, and there was a head laying there, you know. He said he didn't know who it was, but they could identify all the bodies of the dog tags. Anyway, that was a horrible experience. But I tell the kids now when I go to schools, you know, maybe you had the kind of thoughts I had. Would I be brave? Have you ever wondered that? Maybe I did, because I said, I wonder how I'm going to react. Because what if I'm facing a guy with a gun? Or these guys now kick a door open and go in there and shoot people. Are you brave? I don't know. I don't know how it. This taught me. I found out. These Marines right below me shooting 20 millimeters and 40 millimeters. The 20 millimeters, they have a thing that fits around their shoulder, and they're riding that thing. They shot at him right till he hit our ship. Every man did exactly what he's supposed to. And I explained to him, you know, that's why you have fire drills. When you get an emergency, you don't You don't run in circles, scream and shout, relieve the watch. You know, when in trouble, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. The old one say, relieve the watch. Somebody replace me. Anyway, they don't do that. What do? They do just what you've been trained to do. Why? It's the easiest thing to do. It's the only thing to do. You know you can't run around. You train what you're doing. That's why you train over and over and over again. It's like second nature. So every one of these guys performed, including me. When it first came out, when he got real close, I'm sitting up on the top talking to my guys. I wouldn't do anything except being in charge and talking to the people when they commenced firing and things like this. And when he got right there, I dove down and he hit back here and blew me down in the director. I skinned my knees up. One of the guys, two of the young guys down there were lawyers, and when we finally had a break and we were getting something to eat, one of them said, "Well, go down and sign the log and have them put mercurochrome or whatever they do on you, and you'll get a Navy Cross later on because it happened in a battle. See, the blast blew me down in there." Well, that's a good idea. So I went down and I started down the ladder to the deck below where sick bay was. And here was a big, long line of guys holding each other up, skin falling off of them, burned. Here was corpsmen, guys that were not as qualified as a nurse. Maybe some of them weren't. They were operating like a doctor. I mean, what the hell? They couldn't get to these guys fast enough. There were so many of them, you know, and they were badly hurt, burned, blood of them burned. And so I looked at him, and I looked down, and I said, "Oh, shit." And I use that word when I talk to him, too, because that's exactly what I said. Nothing in my mind. I'm not staying here. And I turned around and went, I'm not going to stand in line to get a goddamn medal when those guys are dying and hurting. And then you realize we have lots of guys that have Purple Hearts out in the field. The Marines and the infantry soldiers, they never report them. I mean, there's been lots and lots that were earned that didn't get. I'm sure from my own experience, but the thing it taught me, you're brave. Whether you know you're brave or not, you do the same thing all those guys. I tell the kids that. And a couple of them said, yeah, they've wondered that about themselves. You do just what you're trained to do, and that's the reason we train you. And that's the reason you have a fire drill in your school. Anyway, we finished that one. And then when we got hit, it messed the ship up. We went back to Bremerton for 3 or 4 months, got fixed up, and came back out to help finish. We were not the official invasion of Okinawa, but we were there when they needed reinforcement, and we were fixed by then. We went in and shore bombarded Okinawa. And then we went on a mine sweeping operation, guarding it, which were cutting away mines that our ships might hit near harbors and things like that. And we heard that this A-bomb had been dropped. And I had orders, so I'd asked for flight training, so I was going to go to flight training in December. And now this is early January when this kamikaze hit us, the 5th of January, I think it was.
Of 45.
Yeah, and we went out and we came back maybe in March or April. We got back out, and so covering Okinawa and some others, and the A-bomb dropped, and we didn't know what to think about it. It was as fantastic to us as anybody else. And about 3 days later, the second A-bomb dropped. And about a day after that, the Japanese sued for peace. And the time at that, we demanded unconditional surrender. Well, they put a condition on it, but it was one nobody cared about. They said, let them keep their emperor, and that's about all. And they unconditionally surrendered. And we went in, and General MacArthur went in, set up a government, which is now one of our closest friends, closest allies. And it's an interesting thing about this that I remember So we followed the negotiations, and General MacArthur explained a lot of things to him. Now in the future, the civilians have to control your military. And they looked at him, how the hell do civilians control the military? The military have the guns. Now that's a logical question, isn't it? Well, what do you answer? You answer, well, we think that. We all think that. I think that. All the military guys believe that. So it's easy. But they had to change the whole mindset of the Japanese. But now it happens. The civilians control the military, and I hope it's always that way. And yet I'm a very strong Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, all those. I'm for it. I'm worried now that we're down to about a 274 ship Navy when we had over 600 one other time. Because when something happens, we can be there, not only with the guns, but the troops, because we carry big ships carry a Marine detachment aboard too, which we can put them ashore. So anyway, I think MacArthur did a good job, although we always made jokes about MacArthur because we thought he was kind of vain, you know. Back at Lady Gulf, when we put him ashore, or my group put him ashore, they put him ashore, nobody got their feet wet. But about 2 days later, after they'd secured, they went back and put him in the water with all his staff, and they waded ashore. You've seen that picture. You've seen that picture 100 times. Well, that was posed, and they were grinding the newsreel of that. But the president wanted it. He wanted it because the people needed it, because we had nothing but bad luck and things for all this time. So when you see that, it was, I don't blame that MacArthur. He did that for the American public, and they wanted to, I have returned. This made a dramatic thing, us retaking the Philippines, see? So, well, I got up to there. After that, I went in flight training, and I lived in Panama, Cuba, Paris. My kids went to French school, French kid. I think my time in the military, I wouldn't take anything in the world for it. And I spoke to the guys over at Raider School on the other side, you know, the bad boys over there, and they were very interested because if they are recommended, they can join the military. And I've never seen a man that spent a tour in the military at any level that wasn't happy that he did it and glad he did it, and even liked it probably. And those guys, like the guys at Raider School, I had them in my command. I had command of a squadron later on, and I had guys that I knew who they were. They're usually one of your best men. Why? Because those kids that form the gangs, they're leaders. I mean, they're the guys that lead, that get the others to follow them. They form the gangs, and they're tough guys. But once they get to be 18 or 19, they begin to see, well, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to die? I had one of my good friends in the Navy was a Navy chief petty officer, spent 30 years in the Navy. He said if I could stay longer, I'd stay. He loved it. He told me one day, Joe, we were both interested in wrestling. So he coached the team out at San Diego. He wasn't in the Navy, but he had been a chief. He said, I love it. If I could have stayed longer, I'd stay longer. And you know what? If I hadn't been in the Navy, I'd have died in prison. Because he says, I was a gang in Brooklyn. And he said, the third time I was caught, the sheriff said, okay, buddy, you can go to jail, you can go join the Navy. He said, I joined the Navy. And all those guys, when they get 18 or 19, they begin to think about that. What's going to happen the rest of my life? So they end up frequently being amongst your best men. It's amazing. But it's good. It's good. And I hope a lot. I told those kids at Raider, do well here. So they recommend you and go in. And I said, I took some recruiting pamphlets. I'm not a recruiter. I didn't give it to them. I just gave them to their teacher. I says, if you're interested, see your teacher. She'll give you some. And they were all interested in it. They hope they can. They're about that time. They're hoping they can turn their life around. And I think I'm happy I spent all my time in the Navy because of the things that I got, my kids got, my family. My family I grew up in Oklahoma, went to the Naval Academy. I thought I was pretty sophisticated because I'd been to Texas and to California and things like that. My kids, my one son can speak 3 or 4 languages. Once you learn one, they're good. He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer for the World Olympians, and they all speak French fluently. And most of them took another language. They can get along in school. So it's been very good for me, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm still enjoying it. So with these guys from World War II vets, and I'm glad we teach to the kids at school because we try to teach patriotism. That's why we go. I'm sorry I didn't get very far. I didn't get past the war.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. That was great. So I'm always curious. We're landlocked here in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, you should put this on tape. Why did I go to the Navy?
Yeah.
Let me tell you. Where do you think the guys from the Navy come from? They came from Nebraska and Iowa and Oklahoma and Arkansas and Why? They've never seen the ocean when they join. That's the truth. That's the truth. We have a very high percentage go in the Navy. They're not as the Army. Army's all around there. They got the Navy. Now, kids from New Jersey, the ocean or California, they don't necessarily care about the Navy. Some do, but in general, the kids out here, I'll bet you that 75% of the kids that joined the Navy in the last 50 years from the Midwest never saw the ocean. You know the guy that said, I want you to join the Navy and see the world? He recruited the whole damn heartland for the Navy because all these guys want to see the world. And back in my day, as I said, very few kids had seen an ocean in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, in Indiana, all the whole Midwest. Those are the kids that go to the Navy. They're not the kids on the coast who go to the Navy.